Hello and welcome into the Sporting Pod. Along with Mauricio Ruiz, I'm Cole Pepper. It's a mystery whether Tony will be able to join us. He's on an important call as we speak. So we'll see if he pops in. We'll try to find out if there's breaking news or not. Today on the pod, the USL Super League has launched, what we learned in the first weekend. Plus, preparing for a big local soccer match. That's tonight, Thursday. If you're listening to it after that, you'll have to tune in to the Sporting JAX report to see how it all went down with UF taking on UNF. And we look ahead to the weekend in the Premier League. We remind you that we are fed by the Bearded Pig, locally owned and operated with locations in San Marco and Jax Beach. Make sure you swing by the Bearded Pig for great barbecue and great times. Insert Tony's pig.
Oink, oink.
There. Oh, you went with a traditional oink. All right. USL Super League kicked off this past weekend. We were in Tampa on Sunday as the Tampa Bay Sun and Dallas Trinity drew 1-1. We have talked a bit about this on our radio show and on TV, but we did want to maybe go a little bit more in depth in terms of the behind-the-scenes lessons learned and observations as it relates to what will happen when Sporting JAX launches the USL Super League women's team. So, Mauricio, let's talk about some of the things that you maybe thought about or observed from a player standpoint, from a coaching preparation standpoint, and so forth. There were some lessons I think to be to add to the growing list of best practices.
Yeah, absolutely, and none of them to take away from the moment in women's soccer in this country, and not just in this country, because if we, as we kind of get deeper into talking about rosters. One of the reasons why Tampa Bay weren't as strong is because they were missing international players that hadn't gotten their visa yet, and they're on the sideline, and they just kind of hadn't gotten approval, through immigration. So, it's going to impact the whole world. It's a lot of players that either have gone abroad after college to play for opportunities there, or players that are abroad and they can't quite break in some of the top leagues necessarily. So, just all in all, a great moment for women's soccer that is already on a momentum climb. Adding teams professionally to play in the U.S. just creates so many more opportunities. So behind the scenes, we were there maybe 3 to 4 hours before the game as we're setting up to do the pregame video that we shot. The amount of people putting an event. So it's a 5,000-seat stadium. It's a converted high school stadium that they're partnering with. A beautiful Riverside Stadium right downtown Tampa, overseeing the downtown scene, if you look at the landscape. And you think, okay, it's a high school stadium, it's 5,000 seats, anybody can turn that over. The amount of work that was getting done ahead of the game really puts into perspective on how community-driven a sport event is. And if it weren't for that game, those people that were working at the gate, merchandise, beverages, they wouldn't have been working that day, or they'd be working somewhere else. They have to be competing for that job. So when you think about outside of what's happening on the field, the whole deal about creating another organization, specifically women's driven, and when you look at the crowd, the amount of young ladies that were there, supporters, wearing the colors, it just creates so many more opportunities and inspires the next generation.
Can I also point out, though, yes, I agree with you on the inspirational opportunity and aspirational opportunity for girls who play soccer to have somebody to look up to in their hometown and so forth. One of the things that really struck me was the number of, I would say, teenage to early to mid-20s male supporters who were there. And I think that's a great sign. We've seen, obviously we know that the women's national team is among the best in the world, or the best in the world, depending on, certainly you go off that based on the Olympics. But to see that kind of support, it wasn't just moms with daughters who were there. It was a complete cross-section of the population of Tampa, I think, that was represented there.
Yeah, and I think there are two factors to that. So if you look at youth coaches at a great scheme, for whatever reason, I do think that with women's soccer opportunities coming, this will change. But still a lot of male coaches coaching women's soccer. And they can bring the young players to the game. So there were a lot of male coaches that I recognized from the Tampa kind of youth community there that brought their whole teams out. And they love that, right? So it's not just, a guy talking about soccer to a bunch of young ladies that's not relatable. He just now found a product that he can relay his message to. Because he can see, let's go see the girls play. And then the other part of it, and you can speak to this, is, girl dads that now have an opportunity to connect even further with their daughter.
Yes. Yep.
It's one thing to bring, if you think about Tampa specifically, if you're a soccer dad, you want to bring your daughter to a soccer game. In Tampa, until this past weekend, was a Tampa Bay Rowdies USL Championship. She may like that because it's a soccer game and she plays soccer, but I guarantee you win huge bonus points by taking your daughter to a women's professional soccer game. It's a completely different experience. So a lot of dads were just super excited to bring their daughters to a game.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I look for. I'll be working the games, but for my daughter to be able to see those things. Afterwards, after the game, the players, stuck around, signed autographs, shook hands, took selfies, all that stuff, which is, first of all, is essential when you're talking about building your community around a team in a new league. You see that in a lot of leagues in college sports and things like that. You don't see it necessarily at the NFL level. You're not seeing a lot of players hanging around taking selfies. If it is, it might be after a preseason scrimmage when that's sort of part of the rule that they say, hey, you do this for the fans. But it's seeing how the players, really for both teams, but especially for Tampa, they're being at home, embrace the opportunity to start connecting or continue to connect with their fans, I thought was fantastic. You were mentioning players coming over and playing in this league, in the USL Super League. Let's just take a step back for a moment and talk about where the USL Super League can expect to, maybe by season's end or middle of the next season, whatever it is, expect to be ranked among the world's leagues for women's soccer. I think I would say right out of the gate that England and Spain are probably have the two strongest women's soccer leagues. Certainly the tops of those leagues are very good. There are others, though. Where do you put NWSL in that ranking, and where could USL Super League reasonably think to be in the next year?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of that is subjective, and it is weighed heavily based on those top teams, right? So when you think about the Spanish league and the English Premier League, there's a disparity in between the leagues. So that's why you see the same teams always at the top, and it's not too dissimilar to other leagues, even on the male side. I do think that the NWSL is probably a little more of a balanced league because of the kind of model of American, salary cap parity, and all parity and all of that. This is where the opportunity comes for the Super League. So their starting block is already giving good living conditions to players that right now in Europe are not the case. When we traveled to the Netherlands last year, which is an emerging league, they're their KNVB Dutch league. A lot of the top teams, Ajax is just finally now on the women's side paying all of their players. So if you think about the starting block, there are going to be players in the Dutch league that, by the way, went to the World Cup final. The national team went to the World Cup final just 2 cycles ago. Their coach has been hired by different organizations, right? She's the FIFA, she was the England coach. And so if you think about the level of those top leagues, but the fact that a lot of those young ladies, and this is evidence of what they were sharing with us, and there's a Super League visit that we were there to visit with, a lot of the players on those leagues are still not full-time players, as they will call it, because the minimum living wages that they're receiving aren't good enough. So they have to work and have to do other things. Now, no one in the NWSL or Super League are making millions of dollars. We know that. But the starting block for the Super League are good conditional living wages. And it's the first guaranteed soccer contracts that are being offered in the U.S. Thus far. So the young ladies that are now overseas, that are playing in some of these more competitive leagues that we talk about, it's heavier weighted at the top. But if you're playing in a EPL for a Watford, or for one of the teams that are kind of in the middle, but your wages aren't guaranteed, you're not getting top level wages, that you still may have to do something on the side. And you hear that the Super League is guaranteeing, given minimum wage, covering yourself, covering your housing, covering your insurance, You're like, hang on a second. So I don't know today where that answer is, Cole, but if you look at the trend and if you just look at the tea leaves and everything that's happening, the acceleration of the quality of the Super League is going to move very fast, especially being on the FIFA calendar. They're just going to naturally benefit from piggybacking on the NWSL being in the off season and players being on a 1 year off contract. So there's going to be this litany, an avalanche of players that by November time will be free agents in their own country playing another professional league. Mind you, there's another professional league happening at the same time. They're just on a winter break, and they'll start again in January, February. So I think that the level will grow. I think there's an expectation, reasonable expectation that this fall season for the Super League is still a bit of a learning curve for a lot of teams.
Yep.
But man, I do think that spring of 25, you're going to see a huge influx of top level players.
The other thing that I would point out here in terms of the way that the league will be viewed by players, obviously pay and the benefits and that matters for everybody, but also for once all of the teams in the USL Super League get into their permanent stadiums. This is a 2-year situation in Tampa until they have their own stadium. Once that happens, I think that's going to mark a huge landmark for the Super League in terms of the way that these clubs will be viewed by players and agents elsewhere.
Well, if you look at, and I think a good starting block too that we're going to see that. So Lexington are kicking off. They didn't kick off an opening weekend. They're going to kick off this weekend. They're going to open their own stadium coming up. So Lexington have been on the men USL League One. They're announced that they're going to go USL Championship into the next year, but they're going to kick off their stadium, the opening of their stadium, with their women in a couple weeks here. So it's going to be a brand new soccer-specific stadium in Sporting Lexington, and that's going to be the kickoff of the Super League. So I think to your point of opening up their own stadium, what that's going to look like and set those standards.
Yeah, I think it's going to be big. And Tony Allegretti has now joined us, fresh off a highly important call. Tony, do you have some breaking news?
Yes, thank you. I just want to report, actually it's been reported, but I do want to say that the NWSL is getting rid of the draft, which as you talk about, I know you guys have been talking about the ascent, if you will, of the Super League.
See what you did there?
Yeah. One of the repercussions, I think, of this is going to be the fact that the NWSL not drafting players, not making people go where they don't want to go. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be the first of many improvements in the life of women professional soccer.
It's a reaction to having more competition in the marketplace, for sure. I think one of the most Listen, if you start saying most interesting storylines of the USL Super League first year, certainly the top is just getting it started. Level of play, reaction from the soccer community in those markets, reaction of the wider soccer community. But one of the most intriguing storylines is how players view the options between NWSL and USL Super League. And while the USL Super League has not been taking a position of competition, it's or at least not of rivalry, it certainly is competition. It's more jobs in the marketplace. So there's going to be competition for some of those top jobs. And I would say maybe 5 or 6, the top 5 or 6 players on each roster are everybody could find a spot for these players based on style of play. The rest of the roster, a lot of locals and people who have connections, and there's enough talent to fill those spots. But those difference makers, that's going to be interesting, I think, to see whether coming out of college or professionals who are playing elsewhere, how they view the Super League versus NWSL.
So one thing that I think is going to be the X factor here is the automatic leadership of the USL Super League in Amanda Vandervoort and how she's approaching the Super League and the player interaction versus how players have felt their voice heard or their presence felt in the NWSL as far as part of the league. And obviously they're the biggest product. She has listened and she continues to listen. So one thing that she shared with us down in Tampa is that she has visited every preseason currently in the Super League. She has met with every single team, has given her cell phone number to every single player, and has told the players, call me, text me, let me know how you feel, let me know your feedback so we can fix it in time, not retrospectively at the end of the season when a lot of mistakes have been made, because we know we're going to make mistakes, but if we can fix them in time right now,
That's so smart. You don't want to read about problems with your infrastructure in the paper. You want to know about it real time.
And there are going to be
smart.
problems, right? It's a startup in many of these teams, so you're going to have that. So I think the leadership has taken that approach of making a more accessible league. So as far as if you're a women player that have played in the WSL, you have to endure a lot of issues that they've had, and they fixed a lot of those, and it's on a better place now than it has been in the past. But you still have that historical, cultural history of like, oh, when is the next shoe going to drop? The Super League is going to be an active league for the players. So I do think some of these loanees that are coming from the NWSL, they're going to experience life. Maybe doesn't have the glitz and glamour that currently the NWSL has built up to in the 15,000 seat, 20,000 seat stadiums. But ultimately, what do people want? They want to feel respected. They want to feel like they belong, and they want to get an opportunity to do what they love to do. And they're going to get that in Super League.
Yeah, and the thing about the NWSL, it's in bigger markets, right? Maybe exception of Louisville, et cetera. But it's
Tampa.
more.
Tampa's a big market.
Tampa's big. Well, but
Dallas.
It's expensive, and so being a challenger city, I think can be a bit of an advantage. I love the loans that we're seeing, and the discussion about Open Cup for women's already started. I think by the time this time next year, there'll be plans for that. Maybe if not playing it, there'll be plans for that.
All right, we'll have more on this topic as the USL Super League season unfolds. We'll be talking about it as well on the Sporting JAX report on ABC 25, Wednesdays at 12:30, with an encore presentation at noon on Saturday on NBC 12, right before Premier League coverage. We'll also be talking about it on our radio show, Tuesdays at 6, the Sporting JAX Soccer Hour on 1010 a.m. You can listen live on 1010XL.com. All right, we were going to do this last week, then we got a little long in our because of the breaking news on Mauricio Pochettino. Mauricio in Madrid. We're going to do a little play acting here, and Tony's going to play the role of a technical director for USL Championship team. You can imagine it's Jacksonville if you want. Doesn't have to be. Mauricio is a transfer manager from a major European club, and we're going to kind of just play out what a conversation might look like. A first-touch conversation might look like between a big European club and a USL Championship team when talking about player movement. So, Mauricio, why don't you start the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll play the role of an European club that is looking at the USL and has interest in an upcoming player, right? So in this case, Tony being Sporting JAX director, and I am an unknown European club. So ring, can we do that?
Yeah. Hello, this is Tony.
Hi, mate. I would not do that again. No. I apologize to all of my friends, all my British friends. Yeah,
that sounded more Australian.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's the point. So hey Tony, congrats on the season so far. There's a couple players that we've been monitoring on your squad that I like to discuss with. We have potential interest and maybe bringing them along to our squad to fill some of the needs that we have.
Well, I'm really pleased that you've tracked us. Obviously all of our games are available, and that's good. You probably saw some things with Y-Scout. We're not so much right now a selling club. We're trying to win. But happy to listen to your sort of your feedback and your interest, and see if what we can do from that.
Yeah, well, we have a really young squad. We're fighting to stay in our division. Last year was a bit of a climb for us. We finally got promoted, but we want to fill our roster. We have some depth issues right now. Some of your players could fill those depth issues. We're not competing to win the league just yet. We haven't put that investment at the club at the moment, but we do feel like we have a good environment. We can provide a good development program, and outside of just a player transfer, we would love to see if there's a relationship that we can create between our technical staffs, where they can kind of come over and learn a little bit from what you guys are doing, and certainly be an open door for your coaches in your youth academy to come over. So, it's more than just the transaction of a player, but maybe there's a relationship that we can build between our organizations as well.
Okay, well, now you definitely have my attention. That's much better, to be honest. It's very difficult to find and gel the a team at the caliber that we're playing at right now, and I would hate to mess with that fabric. Now, having said that, we are always trying to create partnerships that benefit both sides, and as such, in understanding that you have an amazing academy, you've got a lot of great talent. We provide, I think, as the second division in the United States, we provide a great atmosphere. We provide very competitive soccer. We also have a brilliant lifestyle here. So when your players come over, we've got really great facilities, great training ground, an ability to really help them grow and not feel like they've been cast off. So that's really cool. But what you're interested in is in our players. So what I need to know kind of is, what kind of relationship fiscally can we have with each other, and if we're even in the same ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, because we're still a club that's trying to keep ourselves in our division and be fiscally responsible, we're not at a place where we're overspending. That's why we see the USL Championship as a good league where there's good young prospects that maybe come at the right price right now. And really what we can talk about as a club is the sell-on price, right? This for you as a young player, specifically we're looking at your number 18 right winger. We think he's got some of the specific abilities that can take players on 1v1, create chances. He will most likely be a depth player for us. We'll definitely get playing time on our reserve team, which is really competitive, but be depth on our first team to come off the bench, which really we're struggling with, and we think he can fit in really well. So while the offer that we may have right now, I don't want you to look at as, oh, it's not the right value, and he may not be the right value now, but if you have the same expectation that we have, and we put in our scouting department and our data analysis to do a progression of where we think he can be in the next 2 years, we believe that jumping leagues from the USL Championship into our league, which is one of the top 8 European leagues, not a top 5, but one of the top 8, we do think that in the next 2 years, we'll be able to sell them to a top 5 league. And at that time, it's really when your club will maximize on that transaction, because we can negotiate the sell-on price, which for you will be the second contract that he received.
Yeah, I was just going to mention sell-on because that's going to be important, especially for this player, because we expect great things. One additional upside for us is that we have a very speedy and deep bench, and so of talent, and so if we can come to terms on the agreement, the sell on, what other things that we can sort of share as clubs, those things are important. Let's build a relationship and then we can get specific with that particular player. Reed Jr. is what I'm calling him.
Yeah, well, we'll send out a report of a player of interest. We'll send out a value that will be a starting block conversation, and some of the other benefits that I think that we can collaborate with for future players, future transactions, some coaching and technical intellect that we can collaborate as well.
Love it. And I'm really pleased that you're going to give the number first because, as a seller, I know what I got, but it's also really helps to move things along. So I appreciate that.
No problem.
All right, so that's sort of how it would go. You building those relationships, starting to open up those lanes of conversation. Number 18 is speedy. I will say that.
He's quick.
He's very good on the ball. All right, just wanted to give you sort of a flavor of it based on Mauricio's experience over in Madrid of how those conversations could unfold. I do want to remind you that if you are a member of Sporting JAX, it's absolutely free. Go to sportingjax.com to sign up. It's a great opportunity on 904 Day, September the 4th, to come out and come to our headquarters on Phillips Highway. You can sign your one-day contract with the team, get photos, meet other fans, and enjoy some camaraderie and pick up your official limited edition Sporting JAX founding member pin.
Yes, you can't overemphasize how cool these pins are. I mean, they are amazing.
All right, see, there you go, right from Tony's mouth. So
highly collectible. We're not. They're very limited. You got to get in.
If you go to sportingjax.com to sign up, you also get benefits like discounts on club merchandise. At the event on 904 Day, September 4th, you'll get 20% off club merchandise as well at our club shop in down there at Phillips Highway. There you also can put down your deposit for season tickets, $25 for the men or the women, $40 for both. Reserves your seat for the Sporting JAX launch coming up.
That's been ramping up, and and I think people, you've probably already talked about the show being on before the Premier League, and we do have some ads running. So, like, I'm really pleased with the ascent, if you will, of our
back on it.
Yep, sorry, our season tickets.
All right, speaking Premier League, let's wrap up with the Premier League matchup that we are most anticipating for the weekend. Who wants to start?
Well, I think Everton will keep Tottenham to less than a touchdown.
Okay, big if true.
Bold.
For me, the Aston Villa Arsenal matchup is an interesting one. Again, it's sort of a prove-it game. Aston Villa fourth last year. They haven't had to deal with Europe just yet. They will at some point. Arsenal picked as by many, including Mauricio and I, as the favorites to win. Tony, did you pick?
No, I think I missed that episode.
Yeah, who's your pick to win the league?
You know what? I'm actually going to go Aston Villa.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be huge.
Yeah.
So Aston Villa Arsenal for me, that is the 12:30 game on Saturday that will immediately follow. I'm looking here at the schedule. Looks like it's maybe on USA this week, but that will follow our show on NBC 12. Mauricio, which game piques your interest?
Well, I've kind of become a bit of a Wolves fan since they were here, and just enjoy watching them in person.
Played well.
Played really well, so just kind of keep up with them. And to be honest, just I think the train wreck that Chelsea is just good entertainment right now. Whether people like or don't like Chelsea, and whether they like what Tim Bowley's doing, or I think people are going to tune in just to see what they look like.
What $1 billion looks like.
Yeah, and see if they can manage to play more than 11 players on the field, because that's really the only way they're going to keep themselves happy.
By the way, I'm going to point out these clubs drew in their first match, so they had something to play for, something to fall back on, but they'd like to get a better result. Bournemouth, Leicester City, Nottingham Forest, and Spurs all drew in their first match. What happens in match 2 starts to sort of plot the direction for the season, so we'll see how that all plays out. One other thing I want to mention before we go is our Jaguars Youth Soccer Clinic that will be taking place at the Flex Field. And great opportunity there. We've done this in the past, helping as part of that with something that you really got going with the JU soccer coaches and players to get out there with the kids before a Jaguars game. You can get tickets from $59. That gives you a ticket to the game and entry into the youth clinic, and really a great day to enjoy both styles of football.
Yeah, well, one of the many smart decisions that the Jags made is realize that there's a opportunity and interest in soccer in the city, and partnering with a local university. As when I was the head coach of JU, we did a soccer clinic before a game. So it's a corner of the market that they maybe hadn't touched, and there's a lot of crossover fans, to be honest with it. But last year we got about 140 kids about an hour before the game. We expect to have a lot more this year. We have a lot more going for us. And I think the interest in soccer.
It was super fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's a nice, cool game, October 6th. It's divisional, so it's indie, but it's also the throwback game.
And Tom Coughlin going into the Ring of Honor game.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, I was saying for throwback game, Mauricio is going to wear short shorts.
Yeah.
Like the 70s.
That's just my Tuesday attire.
That's just the regular standard in-office look that he likes to go for. All right, that'll do it for us here on the Sporting Pod. Thanks so much. We look forward to joining you once again next week. If you haven't already, share this with your soccer fan friends. We'd like to expand the audience here of the Sporting Pod. For Tony Allegretti and Mauricio Ruiz, I'm Cole Pepper. Thanks so much for listening to the Sporting Pod. Got it.